bunch of people in this congregation who've been trained on audio-visual technology skills, and I'm very grateful for that. Some of this stuff might work. If not, please don't be stressed. I'm not. This is just something. This is like a cherry on the sundae. What really matters is the words that we're giving today and what we're thinking about. So we bless this technology, but God, we give you our voices and our thoughts and hope that they are acceptable in your spirit. Amen. So 23 years ago, I don't know if you knew this, one summer, actually it was 2 summers in a row, but one summer I decided to go tree planting. I don't know, has anybody ever tree planted here? You have? Oh, right, yeah. You have? Yeah? Anybody else? It's hard work. My hands were a mess afterwards, after plunging them into soil. That place in Northern Ontario is where I met my husband, or to-be husband at the time. We were quite hippie at the time. And when we came back, my parents called us tree huggers. It's a bit of a kind of a negative connotation to that. And I think to myself, I really would prefer to be called an advocate for the preservation of woodlands. Doesn't that sound like much more of an official label? Thoreau once wrote, "If a man walks in the woods for love of them half each day, he is in danger of being regarded as a loafer. But if he spends his days as a speculator, shearing off those woods and making the earth bald before her time, he is deemed an industrious and enterprising citizen." When I was tree planting, I saw great swaths of desert and humongous amounts of slash created by clear cutting in the industry. It impacted me greatly because I felt that, wow, yes, humans are so greedy. And it's just so raw what we do when we can't see the impact and the effects. I thought, what could I possibly do to make an impact by little me, planting one tree at a time every 3 seconds? Try to get it every 2 seconds, as fast as you could to make the money, of course. But what kind of impact could I have on a large scale? I felt insignificant. But little by little, our crews covered acre by acre, planting in hope of a future forest. I like to think that maybe we did make a little bit of a difference, and that 23 years later, if I were to go there, I'd see trees growing strong. Lucy Larcombe, in her book Plant a Tree, says, "He who plants a tree plants a hope." Our book that we read as well talks about that tension of giving and taking in the earth and the beauty and the dynamic of that relationship and the hope we have in that relationship. Paul also, in our reading in Acts today, talks about God. And that God, he says, made the earth and everything in it. He asserts that we have a common ancestor, and that we are the earth's children, and that God breathes life into everything. This echoes the creation story of Genesis, where the animals and the vegetation, including the forests, come from the earth. Further, it echoes the breath of spirit and the role of the natural world, particularly the forests in sustaining the atmosphere of our planet, the life-sustaining air we breathe. Paul's statement, "We live and move and have our being," invites us to consider our position in creation and our physical environment in which we're part, and our relationship, of course, with forest. Paul went up to the Areopagus in Athens, Greece. So he had taken a big walk around Turkey, went up to Thessalonica, got kicked out of there, got kicked out of a whole bunch of places in Greece, and ended up in Athens, the capital of Greece, where Socrates and Plato and all of the famous philosophers of the time came from. And he made such a stir, they invited him to talk. Here is where they think it might have happened. In the background, you see the Acropolis in Greece, and we have, in front of this group of people who I traveled with, is the entire sermon that Paul gave. What we have today is just the first little chunk of that sermon that he gave in this location. We climbed up these stairs to the top of this hill, and in some places they left the original stairs bare so that we could feel like we were a part of that journey with Paul. And Paul might have walked these actual steps. This is us on top. We listened and read the sermon in its entirety, and that's our professor there. And this is a good picture of where Paul might have delivered his words. Looks just like a big hunk of stone now. I'm sure it was quite impressive at the time. But it's where the council met to discuss ideas of faith, and that's where Paul gave this speech. He was facing trouble in his world at the time, thinking about new things. I mean, he was talking about a Christ who could rival the Roman emperor at the time. He was considered a bit of a troublemaker. And of course, he ended up being thrown in prison later on because of all of these things that he did. But I don't know, he was seeing a lot of trouble in the world, and he saw a hope in a God that was accessible to all, even to the Gentiles of his time. And he was going into the world to tell people of that healing and renewal and that love that he had found in his Christ. That trouble that he was experiencing is echoed in our world today. I don't know if any of you have been watching the news the last couple of weeks, but isn't it scary? I mean, NATO is mad. We've got this Ebola outbreak that's happening in West Africa that doesn't seem to be getting under any kind of control. We've got our humanitarian crisis in Gaza that has sparked more conflict and deaths of so many people. We have terrorist attacks by Al-Shabaab in Kenya, unrest in the war-ravaged South Sudan, the Ukrainian and the Russia conflict that is ongoing, and our hope for peace. And then we've got Libya, Iraq, and Syria with the regional polarization. It seems crazy and scary. And when I listen to these news broadcasts, I often have to turn them off and just sit in silence and prayer. And I feel sometimes so small. What can I possibly do to make a difference? Words like militant, rebel, terrorist, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, vanquishing cancer and the spread of terror, all those words strike fear in our hearts. And people are in pain. And we've got the UN and NATO trying to figure out how to diplomatically establish peace. That all tied into the fact that this is mired in religious conflict. I worry about people in our pews not coming and holding back because of their fear that they think that religion causes conflict. I pray that we can be a beacon of a different voice in our church. Sometimes the world's problems seem so massive, just like that swath of clear cut that we faced when I was tree planting. And at times it feels completely overwhelming. Scott and I, after tree planting, we moved to Calgary for a bit. We were deep into the city of Calgary. And there were times when we were there over those 5 years where we would kind of just get into the routine of driving and the crazy lights and making money and consuming and buying a new car that was maybe, as good as our neighbors, and we were on and going and okay, let's save for a house. We're just on. And every now and then we would get snappy at each other and we would get cranky and we would feel and our relationship would suffer. And then we would go to Kananaskis country and hike in the woods. And on our way back, things seemed to come into focus for us. And we had a renewal sense of love in our relationship. And after those years in Calgary, when things would just get so crazy, we started something we call we usually look at each other when we get this way now, and we say, I think it's time to get back to nature. And we just look at it and say, yeah, it's time. And we just drop what we need to do and we go for a walk in the woods. And we breathe through the trees. And when we come back, the problems may still be there, but it allows us time to refocus and to re-energize and renew so that maybe we have a better understanding of where and how to move forward. This is one of the gifts of nature and our forests. And it is something that we can do and something that can help when we're struggling with what to do and how to do it and what to say. It allows us time and breath so that we can become advocates for the earth. Mark Nepo, I have a reading that I read every morning, and it's a book, and I think I've read it over and over again for 4 years. And each morning, Mark has a writing, and he was talking a few days ago about life-giving elements that move through us and bring us to life. Like Paul's quote, it just echoed in my mind. God that lives and moves and in which we have our being. And he asks us to think about the vastness of the Spirit. And like the wind and the trees have no control over the wind, but they are interconnected with the wind. They make the air. They move with the air, yet they are not the air. Yet this air and the Spirit are interconnected in soul and spirit. We can't underestimate how important it is for us to reconnect with that Spirit and that life-giving breath. We're going to see if this works. This is a picture of lungs. I think it's really quite beautiful. It reminds us of the importance of our life depending on that of the tree. And Alt, Shift, Tab, just try to click on it. Okay, this is where I said, don't get all nervous if this doesn't work. We're just going to try it. And this is a very, very cool link. And if it doesn't work, you should go online if you are able to. It's called The Breathing Earth. It's an image of our Earth over a year. you'll see snow and ice and summer occurring in the northern hemisphere up here. In the southern hemisphere, you can see just slightly that the white expands. And then as we turn into the winter time, we see snow expanding as the trees lose their leaves. And it's as if the earth is inhaling. And then the trees and the leaves come back and they exhale. And it repeats itself with the inhale and the exhale. So how does this all help us live? What can you take from this when you leave today? Because churches and sermons are nothing if you don't have something you can grab onto when you leave today. Well, when you take breath this week, take breaths in gratitude. Take time to look at the trees and their leaves before they fall, because they're going to be falling in the next month or two. Watch the wind blow. Take time from this place where we look around what trees and the gifts and the beauty that trees have given us in our wood, in our sanctuary, that know that God is way bigger than this church. And that God is there and accessible to you all in the creative cosmos whenever you take the time.